Hey, movie fan, Jerry, the Gen X movie guy here, and thanks for checking out this video. We only have a couple of months left in the year, obviously, and we only have a couple of horror films to be released. So I thought it would be a fun idea to take a look ahead into 2025 and take a look at 15 movies that I am really excited to check out. Before I dig into my list, I'd like to take the time to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to my channel and like this video. I really do appreciate all of your help. My goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'd like to do that by the end of the year. I know that's a lofty goal, only a couple of months to do it here in. That's about 600 subscribers that I have to gain. So if you are so inclined, I really would appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe and like this video. I'm going to be busting my ass with my channel here. I'm really excited to see what 2025 brings and get to share my passion of movies with you and the movies that I see, the movies that I've already seen, dig into the entertainment business, as well as share my writing with you, the short stories that I have planned, as well as a couple of books that I'm planning to release in 2025. And so this channel means the world to me. You mean the world to me. If you'd even like to go further in supporting me, I'd love to have you as one of my Jer Force on Patreon, and where you can receive a ton of rewards. And there are 4 tiers to choose from. And regardless of the tier that you choose, you will receive a free 7-day trial so that you'll be able to check out my rewards packages that I have and receive those rewards. And you'll be able to do it absolutely risk free. So, all right, let's go ahead and take a look at 15 horror movies that I am really excited to check out in 2025. And I'm going to be going in order of release date. And all but 2 of them have confirmed release dates. So I'm going to stick those 2 at the end of this video. But so with each of these picks, I'm going to discuss what it is I know about the release, as well as what excites me about each movie and what makes me nervous with each movie. So let's go ahead and dig in here. I'm going to be going in order of release. 13 of the 15 movies I'm discussing do have confirmed release dates. And of course, every release date is tentative until the movie actually comes out. So let's dig in here, going in order of release date, beginning with January 10th and the release of New Line's Companion. The only thing that I really know about this movie, it does look like a psychological thriller horror type movie, is that there is a trailer on it. And speaking of which, all the movies in my list that have trailers, I'm going to put the links to those trailers in the description. So be sure to check it out, especially for Companion, which looks like it has a very strong female lead. Now, what excites me about this movie? Well, Zach Kriegers is actually a co-writer of this movie. He co-wrote Companion. Now, if you're not familiar with the name Zach Kriegers, because I actually had to look him up, he is the guy who wrote and directed Barbarian from a couple years ago, which was one of my favorite horror movies of that year. He doesn't direct Companion. A guy named Drew Hancock is actually the director. He is also the co-writer. He wrote the screenplay with Zach Kriegers. The movie also stars Sophie Thatcher, Jack Quaid, and Lucas Gage. Check out the trailer. Like I said, the link will be in the description. I'm really looking forward to this movie. That's what excites me. Now, what am I nervous about? Well, actually, it's the release date, the January 10th release date. We know as movie fans that January is oftentimes like the dumping ground for studios to put their less than desirable movies, or at least what they view as less than desirable movies, out to the public. So these are movies that generally they think that the critics are going to ravage, the audiences are going to avoid, but January is kind of a slow enough month that maybe they might just hit gold, and actually a couple of these will turn a profit. And has happened. There are success stories, but our wait will be up soon to find out because it's the first movie to be released in 2025 on January 10th. Okay, so a week later, on January 17th, Blumhouse is going to introduce their first movie of 2025, Wolfman, which is based on the old original Wolfman movie. This one is directed by Leigh Whannell. It stars Christopher Abbott, who was also in Poor Things, and Julia Garner, who is best known from Ozark. Universal was planning a dark universe, which was going to be a Marvel type universe, but only for the characters like Dracula, Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman. Well, the first movie of the Dark Universe to have been released was The Mummy from a few years ago, the one with Tom Cruise, which audiences hated, critics hated. It lost quite a bit of money. And because of that, they decided to go ahead, Universal decided to stop with their plans on the Dark Universe. Well, a couple years ago, they went back to the Invisible Man, which was one of the characters that they were planning to include in the original Dark Universe, and they did a standalone film. It was back in 2020, the year of the pandemic, and the movie was released about, if memory serves, a month or two before the pandemic started. Well, the movie did really well, and it was directed by Leigh Whannell, who is best known for writing the first few Saw movies. He did the Insidious movies. I know he directed Insidious 3. Leigh Whannell, to me, is just a master of horror in this new generation of horror directors. And Invisible Man was a really great movie. So what am I excited about? Well, the fact that Leigh Whannell is directing it. To me, he has so much street cred when it comes to horror movies. The werewolf genre, a subgenre, is absolutely one of my all-time favorites, right up there with slasher movies, which are my number one. However, there are a couple of things about Wolfman that do cause me pause. For example, the original release date was actually January 25th. Today, the day I'm filming this video, was the original date that Wolfman had for a release from Blumhouse. But maybe the biggest thing that really makes me nervous about Wolfman is that we recently saw, I believe it was at Universal Horror Nights, their Halloween event that they have at Universal Parks every year. And I'm not sure if it was in Orlando or Hollywood, but there was a Wolfman presentation where the werewolf from Wolfman was introduced, or so we believe, which when people saw it, fans saw what this wolf looked like, it was pretty awful. And so that alone really makes me nervous about what we're going to find. Because let's face it, a werewolf movie is going to succeed or fail based on their presentation of the werewolf. If you haven't seen the video, check it out. But it does kind of make me nervous about Wolfman because that wolf.
Not good.
We'll find out January 17th, though, when the Leigh Whannell directed, Blumhouse distributed movie Wolfman is released. Okay, moving up one more week to January 24th is a movie that I'm actually really excited to see for one reason and one reason alone. But it is the movie Screamboat, which is an independent horror film, which is the second horror film to be adapted off of the Steamboat Willie Mickey Mouse character. Well, Steamboat Willie went into public domain about a year ago, and so some really crafty screenwriters went ahead and got to work. The first movie was called The Mousetrap, which I believe is on video on demand right now. I've yet to see that one. Screamboat is a slasher about a bunch of teenagers who are hunted down by a psychopathic mouse. But what excites me most about Screamboat is that the psychopathic mouse is played by David Howard Thornton. You know, I love David. I'm a fan. The Terrifier series to me is just phenomenal. I absolutely love it. I've already seen Terrifier 3 a couple of times. I just watched the movie Stream, which has 4 killers in it, and David is one of those killers, and he brought a very Art the Clown energy to that role. The link to this trailer is in the description. So what am I nervous about? Wasting 90 minutes of my life that I could have put doing something else constructive or seeing something else that brought more entertainment value to me. I guess that's it. But at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to check it out because slashers are my number one genre, and I try to watch as many as I can. And yes, unfortunately, because it's that specific genre, you're going to watch some real duds, right? It just comes with the territory, but it's okay, right? Because we have fun with these, hopefully. That's why we're horror film fans. That's why we're slasher fans. So yes, when Screamboat is released on January 24th, I am going to check it out. Okay, so whereas I have zero, pretty much near zero expectations for Screamboat, my next movie on this list, I have high expectations for. One of the highest expectations for a movie that I'm going to cover here in this video, and it comes out on February 21st. It's from Neon Studios, which is quickly becoming another A24 type studio. I'm loving their stuff. They're the ones that did Longlegs, and on February 21st, they're releasing a movie called The Monkey, which is an adaptation of a Stephen King short story of the same name, which came out of the anthology book Skeleton Crew. Now, what excites me about this? I have 2 words. Osgood Perkins. He's directing it. He directed Longlegs. He is reteaming with Neon Studios for this movie. As you'll find out, there are a couple reasons to be nervous about this movie, but the fact that he wrote and directed it is not one of them. It's the single reason, or one of the top reasons, why I am excited to see this movie. The trailer looks really interesting, much in the way that Longlegs looked interesting, and he delivered like a Mac Daddy with Longlegs. So I am expecting huge things from The Monkey. Real high expectations. February 21st is a really rock solid release date. A lot of movies that are expected to be hits, this is the time of the year that they start to come out. So I do think that Neon is expecting quite a bit with this movie. They released the trailer early. Like I said, the link for that trailer will be in the description. But I am really hopeful that The Monkey delivers. What makes me nervous? Well, it is an adaptation of a work by Stephen King. And especially the short stories have been more difficult to adapt. You know, if you think
Stephen King's Children of the Corn, an adult nightmare.
Stephen King's Maximum Overdrive.
2 of my guilty pleasures, by the way, but I am well aware of just how bad those movies are. They were adapted from short stories. So sometimes adapting one of his short stories into a feature-length film, and I think that's probably true of any short story, because by its very nature, you're going to have to create more to fill in because the short story is short. It doesn't really fit into a feature film. You know, that causes me a little bit of pause there. But, you know, once again, I go back to the fact that, you know what, I'm going to trust Osgood, because right now Longlegs is really right near being number 1 or 2, my first or second favorite of this year. And so I am a fan, and I can't wait to see what he does next, which we'll find out on February 21st when The Monkey is released. Then on February 28th, Paramount Pictures is releasing a movie called Vicious. It's a horror film, and I know nothing about it. I do know that it has been written and directed by Brian Bertino, which gets me into why I'm excited about the movie because he is the writer and director of the first two Strangers movies, the good ones, not Chapter 1 that came out this year that was absolutely terrible, but the first two, which I'm a fan of. And so, quite honestly, that does kind of excite me. There isn't a trailer for this movie, and I'm really looking forward to one, though. Also, the movie stars Dakota Fanning and Catherine Hunter, and I am a huge fan of Dakota Fanning, have been ever since I Am Sam. I think she's an incredible actress. It's so good to see that she has transitioned from that child actress to adult actress in what seems kind of a seamless fashion. Now, she was in Watchers this year, the movie directed by Ishana Shyamalan, which really fell way below my personal expectations. I was really disappointed with it, so hopefully Vicious will be a comeback for her. Also, Catherine Hunter, the lone bright spot from that trash heap, The Front Room. You know, Catherine Hunter is an exciting actress. She just eats up the screen. She is amazing. Her being in this movie is another reason that I'm very hopeful, and I'm hoping that it's more towards Tragedy of Macbeth than it is Front Room for her, that she has actually found a role that is worthy of her talent. Now, what makes me nervous? Well, once again, this had an original release date of August 8th of this year. Now, August is not a month, it's the slowest month of the summer at the box office, and it tends to be another month, not to the extreme that January is, but these tend to be the movies that are just kind of pushed out by studios still, and not a whole lot of faith is given in them. Not to say that there aren't hits that will come out of August, but the fact that this movie had an August date and they opted for a February date, held it back basically 6 months, tells me that there may be a little bit of trouble with this production. But only time will tell, and we will find out on February 28th when Vicious is released. All right, we are now at my most anticipated horror movie so far of 2025, and that is the movie Sinners, a Warner Brothers movie that is going to come out on March 7th. Now, there is a trailer for this movie, and I do encourage you to check it out if you haven't already. I really believe that there is going to be huge buzz around this movie here in the next few months. There are many reasons to be excited about this movie. The biggest for me is the fact that it is directed by Ryan Coogler, who also directed Black Panther and Creed. And so this is going to be his first horror film, and it looks like he's not just, dipping his toe into the horror pool, but he is diving headfirst in. And the trailer looks amazing, so if you haven't seen it, check that out. He is also re-teaming with Michael B. Jordan, so he's going to star in the movie, and there was a bidding war for the movie. So apparently, it had a lot of interest from studios. So I am expecting big things from this movie. So we will find out on March 7th, though, when Sinners is released. And then later in March, on March 28th, another Blumhouse movie is going to be released. This time, it's a movie called The Woman in the Yard. And this is a movie, honestly, I don't know a whole lot about. Why am I excited about it? Well, it's directed by, and I hope I pronounce this right, Jaume Collet-Serra. Something tells me I may have butchered that name. I'm hoping not, so my apologies if I did. He is the one who directed House of Wax and Orphan. And Orphan is one of my favorite movies, and House of Wax is actually one of my guilty pleasures. There isn't a whole lot known about The Woman in the Yard, but it is a Blumhouse release. March 28th is a fairly decent date to release a movie. Shows a little bit of confidence in the movie. Now, it doesn't always mean that it's going to pan out. This year, Blumhouse's March release, even though it came out a little bit earlier in March, was Imaginary, which, once again, along with Night Swim, is in the running for ending up on my bottom 10 worst 10 list of the year. So it doesn't mean that much, but I am kind of excited for that. As well as the movie stars Danielle Deadwyler, who I last saw in the movie Till, which I thought she should have received an Oscar nomination for. I don't know if Woman in the Yard is going to be that kind of Oscar contention type movie for her, but the fact that she's in this horror film tells me that it must be a little bit of a higher quality movie, or I would hope so, to attract her kind of talents. Now, why am I nervous? Well, it did have an initial release date of January 10th, 2025, which, remember, that's the day that Companion is coming out, a week before Wolfman is coming out, which may be why they moved it out of that January 10th spot, because they didn't want it competing with Wolfman in its first week, which would be Woman in the Yard's second week. So they moved it to where there isn't really a whole lot of competition in March. We're going to find out, though, March 28th, when The Woman in the Yard is released. All right, and then a couple weeks later, Blumhouse is going to release another horror film, this one on April 11th, and it's a movie called Drop. Once again, no trailer for this, and I don't really know much about it. So what excites me about it is that it's actually directed by Christopher Landon, who also directed Happy Death Day and Freaky, two movies that were very much pleasant surprises. So that alone has made me excited for this movie. I really kind of dig him as a director. You know, he does horror comedy really, really well. So that's kind of what I am expecting Drop to be, which is okay. I think that definitely has a place in the horror genre as well. So all are welcome, right? Now, what, am I nervous about? Well, it is a Blumhouse movie. And quite honestly, Blumhouse Studios has been, having a few more misses than hits as of late. In 2025, they're planning on releasing quite a few movies. There's going to be a couple of turds in the punch bowl in there somewhere. So hopefully it's not Drop, and I really look forward to seeing its trailer. And so that's Drop, with a release date so far of April 11th. All right, another one of my most anticipated movies of 2025. It is a summer release, major release date, busy time of the year, coming out on June 20th. Sony is going to release 28 Years Later, the closing of the trilogy that began with 28 Days Later. Then we went to 28 Weeks Later, and now we are finally at 28 Years Later. Once again, directed by Danny Boyle. Let's get to what excites me about this movie, first of all, and that is Danny Boyle coming back. There aren't a whole lot of zombie movies as of late that I have really fallen in love with. Even movies that a lot of fans love and worship, almost like World War Z. I was a little bit disappointed in it. I didn't connect with it in that way. But the first two 28 movies were incredible. And so I am really looking forward to 28 Years Later. Cillian Murphy is returning. Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who we last saw in The Fall Guy, is going to be in the cast this time. Jodie Comer, who gave one of my favorite performances this year in a movie called The Bike Riders, is also joining the cast on 28 Years Later. I am really, really excited to see her. So I am really expecting high expectations on this movie. I can't wait to see the trailer. Of course, there isn't one. It has a June release, so I would expect the trailer sometime February or March. But really, really looking forward to that. Is there anything that makes you nervous about this? Well, the only thing that really makes me nervous, it's not really much to do with the quality, but with the box office performance. Because I think that the movie's quality could be overshadowed by a weak box office performance. Now, I do believe that Sony believes in it, especially if this June 20th release date holds. And this has been reported, so we'll have to see if this bears out, but it's reported to be around $75 million, which means that the movie has to take in globally around 150, 175 million to just break even, and then anything over that would be profit. Now, the first two movies in this franchise, their production budgets were right around 20-25 million. And the highest grossing of the two only grossed, I believe it was right around 70 million. So will there be enough additional audience this many years after the last movie? Or will this movie become a financial disaster of sorts? Or will it end up making its money on VOD and further down the line? Because that's always a possibility as well. So am I nervous about the quality? Not so much, but as a movie fan, am I nervous? A little bit about the box office performance, because horror movies always seem to work best when that production budget stays kind of in that 10 to 20 million range, even lower than 10 million if you can, because there is such a rock solid fan base for the horror genre that we will easily turn out and spend 30, 40, 50 million with most horror films. But when you set your budget at nearing 100 million, you're expecting a lot of viewers to come in who may not be the most diehard horror fans. We will find out, because there are a couple of horror films coming out in 2025 that have these huge budgets. But we're going to find out in June when 28 Years Later comes out. And as of now, it looks like Blumhouse has decided to take on 28 Years Later head-to-head, almost. Because on June 27th, they are releasing Megan 2.0. I do have high expectations for Megan 2.0, but there are reasons, as I'll discuss here in a sec, to be nervous. But what am I excited about? Well, Gerard Johnstone is returning as director, as well as Allison Williams and Violet McGraw returning to star in the movie. So the band is getting back together again. I really believe that, there's a good chance that this movie can find a fresh path forward, because so much has really changed in AI even since Megan came out. There's so many different paths that they could take. Is there anything that makes me nervous about this? Well, yeah, it is a sequel at the end of the day to a movie that really felt almost like a standalone movie, but when it made money, you just knew that they were going to make a sequel to it. There's a couple of those movies coming out in 2025. It has big shoes to fill. A successful sequel isn't one that could just copy the first movie. Those sequels tend not to work. A successful sequel is one that's going to find fresh material while building on and respecting the original. And in horror, a successful sequel is oftentimes even bigger and badder than the original. So will Megan 2.0 do that? I'm really hoping Gerard does it twice in a row. It appears that Blumhouse does believe in it, giving it its June 27th release. However, it did have a couple of other release dates, so this has been delayed a couple of times. January 17th was an original release date. That's where Wolfman is now, so they may have moved it because of Wolfman. But then Megan 2.0 was also set to release on May 16th, which was an even kind of bigger release date. It's kind of that pre-summer release date that tends to do pretty well for these kind of movies. Maybe they moved it to that late June spot because they wanted it closer to July 4th, which is really that's the big ball game there. That's the big weekend of the year. Tends to be is right in that time frame, late June, July. So maybe they really think they have a huge moneymaker on their hands. But remember, this is going to be the second week of 28 Years Later. So as far as horror films go, there will be some kind of overriding competition with that movie, I would expect as well. So can't wait for Megan 2.0 when it does get released on June 27th. Okay, time to move into the fall, and that is going to be going into September 26th. This is the Warner Brothers release next year of The Bride, which is being directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. The movie is another adaptation of The Bride of Frankenstein. It's going to star Jesse Buckley, Christian Bale, Penelope Cruz, Peter Sarsgaard, Annette Bening. So there's a really rock solid cast in this. I'm thinking that this movie hopefully will be a fun ride and offer a fresh take into the whole Bride of Frankenstein story. What am I nervous about? Well, you know, these adaptations of like these old monster movies are really hit or miss. And in fact, if you look back at the Bride of Frankenstein movies, other than the original, none of them really stand out. The last one I remember is from the 80s with Sting and Jennifer Beals. And I honestly, I didn't think that was that great of a movie. So, hopefully this will be done well. It is a Warner Brothers movie, so it tells me that they probably put a lot of money into it. So hopefully it's paid off. We'll see. The other thing that makes me nervous is looking at the September 26th release. So I'm going to dovetail that into my next movie, which is another movie that is supposed to have a September 26th release, which is the Lionsgate release of Saw 11. There isn't a whole lot known about this movie, but fans are kind of assuming that it's going to that it will fall within the original Saw timeline, either between 2 and 3 or possibly 3 and 4. And only time will tell on that. But Saw 10 was enough to give us Saw fans excitement for the next chapter, because Saw 10 was probably the best installment since the second, Saw 2, which still is kind of like the pinnacle of the series, in my opinion anyways. Yeah, so I'm really hopeful. And Kevin Greutert is, and I hope I said his name right, he is actually returning as director, and the movie is going to be written by Marcus Dunstan, who also wrote The Collector and The Collection, and he also wrote 5 of the Saw movies, so he really knows this franchise. So really excited about that. What makes me nervous? Well, first of all, there was an original release date of September 27th of this year. So it did get delayed an entire year. That could have just been the early pre-production having to catch up. They were behind. So maybe give them the benefit of the doubt. However, it is an 11th installment in a horror franchise, and that always is a reason to be a little bit nervous, because it's an 11th chapter, and Saw 10 came out of nowhere seemingly to be such a good movie. So hopefully Saw 11 does the same thing, but the fact that it is Saw 11 does bring a little bit of, or raise a little bit of nervousness, I guess you could say. But it's going to be an interesting, if this release schedule holds true, it is going to be interesting to see both this and The Bride. I'm not saying they're head-to-head movies. I mean, maybe the fans don't really overlap that much between the two, but they are both horror films and released from major studios. So I would almost expect one of these movies to get bumped to a different date.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
But we shall see. So as of now, though, Saw 11 does have a September 26th release date. All right, next up is a movie that I am so praying to the horror gods that this one is good. And that is the October 17th release of The Black Phone 2, which is being released by Universal. What does excite me about this movie? Well, there is quite a bit. First of all, once again, the band is getting back together. Scott Derrickson is returning as director. Ethan Hawke, Mason Thames, Madeline McGraw, who I think even stole the movie in the first one with her brilliant performance. They are all returning. Joe Hill offered ideas to this follow-up, so I think it sounds like he was a little bit involved. So kind of cool there. So there is a lot to be excited about. The Black Phone was one of my favorite movies of any kind, of any genre, from a couple years ago. Probably my top 5 horror films of that year. But why am I nervous? Well, the fact that this was a standalone movie, meant to be a standalone movie, from what I believe was a short story. I don't want to spoil the end of Black Phone if you haven't seen it, because I want you to check it out. But it ends in a way that doesn't really leave room for a sequel. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. But yeah, that does make me a little bit nervous. It also had an original release date of June 27th of next year. That is when movies release their biggest blockbusters, or movies that they hope will be blockbusters. That's when they usually release those. And that's what the original release date for Black Phone was. And then they moved it to October 17th. Not a bad release date, given that it's a horror film and it's being released a couple weeks before Halloween. So, I mean, it could have been that they were trying to move it away from bigger competition, because Megan 2.0, as I said earlier, is coming out on June 27th. I do have high expectations, and I hope that Scott Derrickson goes 2 for 2 here, because The Black Phone is a great, great movie, and I'm hoping The Black Phone 2 is as well when it comes out next October. All right, so that's 13 movies. Let's talk about the last 2 here. These 2 do not have confirmed release dates, but I'm going to kind of surmise as to where they may come out if they do actually end up getting released. And the first one is Final Destination Bloodlines, the latest in the Final Destination franchise. Now, it has been confirmed that this movie is in production, has been in production, and will be released. So the fact that there is a new Final Destination is a foregone conclusion. The release date, however, is not. What do we know about this new one? Well, it is directed by Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein, who are most famous for doing the Kim Possible movie. So very far from the horror genre, right? And this one is supposedly set in the world of first responder. Why am I excited? Final Destination is one of my favorite franchises. Yeah, I love all the movies. I even have a special place in my heart for, I believe it's the 4th one that most people don't care for. It's either 3rd or 4th. But I actually enjoy them all. Once or twice a year, I will go through and binge watch all of the Final Destinations. So I am really excited for Bloodlines for that reason, because I am a huge fan of the franchise. I'm also excited to see Tony Todd, who is going to be returning, and apparently this is also known as that this movie Bloodlines is supposed to go into his backstory quite a bit, because if you're familiar with the franchise, you know that the Tony Todd character isn't really a character that is very well known, at least his backstory. He just kind of pops up in a scene or two, and then he's gone. So apparently in Bloodlines, his backstory is going to be explored a little bit. What am I nervous about? Well, the fact is that it has been quite a while. Yes, I'm a little bit nervous that the directors of Kim Possible are going to be left in charge of reinvigorating this franchise, which has been stalled for a little bit. And also, production ended on this movie a few months ago. So I do believe that a 2025 release is for sure. Now, when do I see it being released? Because it doesn't have a release date. Well, the first 3 of the franchise had relatively early year releases, and the last 2 were released in August. I do think that Bloodlines is going to actually receive an August release. First of all, we don't have a confirmed release date yet. And I feel that if it were going to be a January through April type release, that we would already know about it. So I do think that it's going to be later in the year. There isn't really anything in August right now. It's kind of an open slate. And August is a really good time to drop that random horror film that can turn out the quick $50 to $100 million gross in 2 to 3 weeks at the end of the summer. So I do believe that an August release date for Final Destination Bloodlines would probably be the most optimum. All right, next up is a movie that I'm really, really hoping that we do get to see here in 2025, and it's another sequel, and that is Thanksgiving 2, the sequel to the Eli Roth movie from a couple of years ago, the slasher movie set around the holiday of Thanksgiving, which started out as a trailer, a fake trailer, in the Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez movie Grindhouse, which is one of my favorite movies. Thanksgiving was my favorite trailer of the 3 or 4 that they showed in that movie. I loved the feature film from a couple years ago. I love Eli Roth, though, as an individual. I think he's just got that kind of dark, sick sense of humor, which, I share. So, he's someone that I personally have always liked, even though I've never been a huge fan of his movies. Cabin Fever was not one of my favorites, for example, but Thanksgiving was, and I'm really excited to see what he does with Thanksgiving 2. Also, Addison Rae is expected to return as well. Now, in August, just a couple months ago, Eli Roth did say that he and his co-writer had handed in their final script. So hopefully they'll be getting into production here in the early part of 2025. By the early part of 2025, have plenty of time to go into post-production before the release of the movie, which I could see coming out. I think it's pretty much a given. A movie called Thanksgiving 2 will probably receive, at the earliest, a Halloween release, but could even go into November, which I believe is when the first movie was released. Why would I be nervous? Well, let's face it, anytime you do, once again, a sequel to a slasher movie, you're always running the risk that it's going to be a pile of shit. So Thanksgiving 2 could end up being that. But I'm putting my faith in Eli Roth that Thanksgiving 2 will be every bit as fun as the first one. So hopefully, keeping our fingers crossed, 2025, we do get to see the sequel to Thanksgiving. All right, so that's it for my list. Thank you so much. If you are made it to this part of this video, thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you. And if you haven't already, please take the time to subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. I really do appreciate it. Like I said earlier, my goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And I know that with my hard work and your assistance, we can make it happen together. So once again, thank you. And I would also love to have you join me on Patreon and become a member of my Jer Force there, receive tons of rewards. And don't forget, right now, when you choose any of the 4 tiers, you are going to receive a free 7-day trial. So you get to go through and see all the rewards, experience the rewards that you will receive as a member. So hope to see you over there as well. All right, guys, so that's it for now. And until next time, that's a wrap.